Following up the theme of national trauma from the last episode, I introduce another disaster that shook the country and became the source of bizarre stories that I'm going to read today. The massive gas explosion in Sangin-dong in the southern city of Daegu, South Korea. At 7:52 April 28, 1995, the construction site of the city metro line rocked with a massive explosion. The fireball reached up to 50 meters high, obliterating the entire 400-meter stretch of the construction site together with the surrounding buildings and cars. The gaping hole of the construction site was covered with heavy-duty iron panels on the street level, and with the explosion, these 300-kilogram heavy panels blew up and rained down, crushing on the people who might have survived the initial blast. 101 people perished and 202 were injured. It being the morning hour, half of the victims were young students who were on their morning route to their school. The direct cause of the disaster was determined to be the gas pipe rupture at the nearby construction site of a department store. The gas, which is heavier than air, flowed and pooled in the metro construction site and possibly ignited by the flames used on the site. As huge and tragic as the disaster was, it wouldn't have turned into national trauma if it was mere an isolated case of an accident. But years heading to the disaster, South Korea had been rocking with one disaster after another. In March 1993, saw a train derailing, killing 73. In July the same year, a domestic flight crashed, killing 68. In October the same year, a ferry boat sank, killing 292. A year later, in 1994, a whole section of a deck of one of the major bridges over the Han River failed, carrying several cars and a commuter bus down with it, killing 32. From the late 80s, South Korea saw a miraculous economical boom, often called as the miracle of Han River, dubbed after the miracle of Rhine River of Germany decades prior. By the early 1990s, South Korea was the fastest growing economy in the world. After decades of struggle with dictators and military coups, the country also saw significant progress in democracy. Considering the country was in rubble and one of the poorest after the Korean War, there were plenty of reasons for the nation and the people to feel proud. But the unprecedented rapid growth was hiding flimsy structure behind a gleaming facade. The attitude of result above the procedure, speed above substance, profit above safety was everywhere. The outdated regulations were often ignored, corners were cut, the authority was irresponsible. And by the mid-1990s, people were brutally reminded the high ground they were standing on was literally collapsing by one physical manifestation of the corrupt society after another. It was all clear to see with the gas explosion too. The basic infrastructure such as gas and water pipes were not laid according to the plan and regulation. The particular gas pipe of this disaster was found a whole 1 meter shallower than on the paper. The constructors of the department store also neglected the required precautions on their part, which resulted in the rupture of the pipe. The Daegu City Gas Company was painfully slow to react to the report of the ruptured pipe. The authority and political parties played the blame games, avoiding taking responsibility. The president himself commented his government was one of the victims. The media was slow to react and properly investigate the disaster, and the punishment of those in charge was ultimately inadequate. Storytelling is a very human activity. When facing a reality too unpleasant or a disaster too great to comprehend, we turn it into a story. It's not to belittle the reality, but it's a human attempt to cope, and it eventually turns into a way of remembrance and understanding the meaning of it all. The fact that not a small number of stories about the explosion float around the Korean internet web communities to this day testifies that people still remember and still try to heal. So here are 5 such stories about the 1995 gas explosion in Daegu. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by your host, Anthony. April 28th, 1995. My family lived in Sangam-dong, Daegu. That morning, my mom overslept and had to rush to wake my sister and me up, get us ready for the school. She herself was running late for her work. As she put on her shoes, black pumps with red heels, she noticed the heels had turned all black. She was surprised, but was in the rush, and just assumed the kids might have painted it over with a Sharpie pen. As she was race-walking down the road, an old hobo woman who lived in the neighborhood popped out from nowhere and started screeching at her for no reason. "You stupid bitch! Go back home if you don't want your head blown up!" Mom was chased back inside. All shaken up by the assault that was totally uncalled for, she decided to skip the morning and informed her office that she was coming in after lunchtime. With unexpected a few free hours in hand, she turned on the TV. Breaking news from Sangin-dong, Daegu. There was a gas pipe explosion at the metro line expansion construction site. Mom dropped on the spot. That was exactly the spot she would have walked past had she gone to work as usual. The mad hobo lady might have felt something and saved her life. But the hobo woman was nowhere to be seen in the neighborhood since that day, and Mom never had a chance to ask or thank her. I'm from a small town. A few years ago, I came to Daegu with just about 300,000 won in my pocket. Big number, but that's just about $250. Fortunately, a friend had settled down there already, and she let me stay at her place a while. When I got my first salary, the first thing I did was buying my friend a drink with pork belly barbecue, and the next thing was finding a place of my own. My friend generously said I could stay longer, but I feared had I lived with her longer, I might lose the friendship eventually. The rooms in the area called for in average 2 to 300 million deposit and 2 to 300,000 monthly rent, unfortunately well above my budget. My friend recommended to check out local notice boards rather than estate dealers, and I wandered through one notice board after another around the town. It was in a quiet area not far from Sangbedong that I found an advertisement of a room for 100,000 won per month. Being desperate to find the cheapest room possible, I called the number. An old woman answered and gave me the address. The room in question didn't belong to the house building itself, but looked like a former storage converted. Bit damp and some kid's scribble still left on the wall, but at least it was spacious. And for that price? I moved in on the following weekend with my meager household. After moving in, I went to the snack bar just across the street for a bit late lunch. The owner chatted me up. "You moved into that house?" "Yes, I hope I could settle down well," I said. "Oh, right. I hope the landlord explained it all to you," the shop owner said. Explain what?" "Oh, nothing. Here's your ramen." But she could not slip away, having triggered my curiosity like that. I kept asking what she meant. She reluctantly told me that a young mother with a baby had moved in the same room just a few months ago. She suffered terrifying episodes of sleep paralysis night after night, and in the end, gone mad. She broke her baby's leg by beating it with a pot and butted her own head against the wall till her head torn open. After lunch, I went to a local salon to get a haircut. I probed the hairdresser for some more information. "So, have you lived here for a long time?" I said. "Oh yes, why?" asked the hairdresser. "I've just moved into the room in the house over there. Did something happen there before?" "Oh, all I know is the family's two kids died when the gas pipe exploded in Sangin-dong, and their mother, in grief, hung herself in the storage room." In 1995, there was a massive gas explosion at the new metro line construction site. The accident took place in the morning, claiming many casualties from young students who were on the way to school, including the two sons of my landlord's family. The hairdresser continued with a rumor about the boys. That on that fateful morning, boys at the breakfast table talked about their dreams from the night earlier. That they both saw a black car barging into their rooms. Two terrible stories. But I just moved in there, and where else did I find such a cheap room? Back home, I dozed off while watching TV and woke up in the middle of the night with thirst. I crawled over to the fridge to fetch a bottle of water. And through the crack of the fridge door hinge, I thought I saw a white figure in the dark of the kitchenette. I quickly turned on the light to find nothing. Only then I noticed the TV I had left on was off too. I lied back down, but I was wide awake already. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from where the fridge stood for the whole night. Next day, I bought a floor-length mirror from the market and asked a close work colleague if she could help bring it to my room with her car. She agreed in return of me buying her a drink. Well, a drink led to many drinks, and in the end the colleague crashed in my room for the night. I didn't say it, but actually welcomed it, having spent the spooky first night alone. In the middle of the night, a series of thuds woke me up. My colleague was butting her head against the wall repeatedly at about 5 seconds interval. At first I thought she was funny when drunk. Then I remembered the story about the young mother who had lived here before me. I turned around to look at her again and saw the reflection on the mirror. A middle-aged woman holding my colleague's head and bumping it against the wall. Her blank face was looking back at me. I jumped up to turn the light on. The woman was nowhere to be seen. I shook the colleague up. She seemed still hazy in the dream. "Why are you bumping against the wall?" I said. "What? I don't know. Somebody kept pushing me against it. Wasn't it a dream?" she said. "Didn't it hurt enough to wake you up?" I said. "No, it didn't hurt. It just felt funny, like my head was sucked into something." Nevertheless, she seemed spooked enough. She claimed she was sober now and went back home right then. Left alone again, I turned on the TV and set it to turn itself off in an hour, hoping that I fell asleep again before then, which, to my surprise, I did. In the half-asleep state, I saw the TV going off in the middle of the female presenter reporting on something. But the image of the presenter didn't go away, left on now blackened TV screen. Then I felt something approaching from the kitchenette, and with that my body was paralyzed. I felt increasing pressure on my throat, as if somebody was grabbing on my throat. In the struggle to wake up from the sleep paralysis, my head turned a bit and saw in the mirror something sitting on me, strangling me. That thing, noticing that I was looking in the mirror, turned to look at me in the mirror and said something. "Get out." Next day, I moved back in my friends and gave up the room despite losing the deposit. An old lady got a taxi from Daegu station. The driver and the lady got talking. Apparently, she came up from a countryside for her ill daughter living in Daegu City. The taxi stopped at a junction waiting for the light to change, when the old lady made a passing comment. "Gosh, what are all these people busily roaming around for?" The driver was confused. It was well past the morning rush hour, and there weren't that many people anywhere around. Then he realized something and felt his hair standing on its ends. They were right underneath the flyover where the terrible gas explosion took place. What were they that the old lady saw? On the location where the gas explosion happened is now a department store. The mother of my friend got to work there not long after the opening of the store. Most department stores would have food hall on the underground floor, but oddly, this one had extra storage space for clothing instead. Mother of the friend was in charge of managing the stock. One day she checked on the storage before the closing and found it in a mess. Not only the empty boxes and packing materials were scattered around, mangled with the dust on the floor, but also dismantled mannequins were all over the place. Clearly, other staffs who took out the stock didn't bother to clean them up afterwards. She was annoyed, but since she saw it anyway, she decided to clean them up herself. Folded the boxes away, put all the bags and packing materials in the garbage bags, and pieces of mannequins in a big box. Next morning, she called in other staffs and complained that they shouldn't leave such a mess in the storage room. Their half-hearted apologies soon turned to a protest that it couldn't have been so bad and she was being too fussy. It turned into a heated argument, and they decided to check on the surveillance camera installed in the storage. It indeed showed her cleaning up the room by herself. folding boxes, gathering up packing materials. But there were no mannequins. One could see her motioning to pick something up from the ground and put it in the box. She insisted she did feel the arms, legs, and heads and bodies, its weight and all. But on the video, one couldn't see anything in her hand. She quitted the job there and then. It's a story from an acquaintance of mine. He now runs a mobile game developing company, but about 10 years ago, he was an unsuccessful writer. Citing his irregular income and uncertain prospect, his girlfriend's parents didn't approve of their marriage. Depressed by his overall situation, he tried to hang himself. Fortunately, he survived, and in the end, he decided to give his life another chance. He attended a hospital in Sangin-dong to mend his body and mind, but still suffered a lingering depression, brain fog, and burst capillary in his eyes. So one day he was coming back from his treatment with the still bloodshot eyes. At the metro station, he sensed something was amiss. People were waiting on the platform all right, but they were all standing in line in military attention position, looking towards the rail. Odd, but not obviously weird. So when the train arrived, he jumped in. The really weird thing happened then. Nobody who was standing on the platform got on the train. There was no other line stopping at that station, and it was indeed very odd they wouldn't take this train had they been really waiting for a train. In the train was just one old lady sitting down. He took a seat on the opposite side of the platform, kept looking at those odd people. The doors closed, and the train started moving, and they started moving together, keeping the same pace as the train, still looking down on something. He just thought it had to be his brain gone funny with PTSD or something after his suicide attempt, and tried to ignore the frightening sight outside the window. As soon as the train arrived at the next station, the old lady jumped up from the seat. Before she got off, she turned to him and said, "You did see them, didn't you? I can't ride on this train." And then trotted away in the speed unthinkable for an old person walking with a stick. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for your listening. I was a little boy when this and other disasters happened, but still clearly remember how my eyes welled up watching the news reports on them. Media self-mockingly called the country the Republic of Disasters. Growing up in Korea in this period was definitely very dynamic, for better and worse, I must say. Unfortunately, the gas explosion was not the end, though. Just a few months later, even bigger and almost surreal disaster occurs, and that will be the subject of my next episode. So stay tuned. If you enjoyed my work, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, share it with others, and subscribe to my channel. Please. Until the next, stay safe and take care.